This is the March 16th, 2015 meeting of Legislative Affairs. All rise and salute the flag, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. What's that? Public safety also. Oh, it is? I apologize. This is a joint meeting of the Legislative Affairs and Public Safety. The chairman of Public Safety is, of course, our own Charles Patch here. So I apologize for leaving him out of that introduction. He certainly will be a big part of this meeting. We're here tonight, obviously, to go over all the fine points of the 40U ordinance that we hope to pass tonight, if all the questions are answered. So, where do you want to begin, Mr. Chairman? I think we'll take the learned attorney, Attorney Brown. A little levity, what the heck?
Thank you, Councilors. Peter Brown, D'Ambrosio Brown, 14 Proctor Avenue. I know we spoke about the 40U process in pretty good detail last week in front of the whole council. I just wanted to highlight a few issues and give some demonstrations about some of the properties and the issues that Inspectional Services is trying to address, and all the councilors as well. So if at any point there's any questions or concerns, please interrupt me. I'll try not to be repetitive from last week. I think a lot of councilors said it very well last week and saying this is really about quality of life and public safety issues. And you heard from the Director of Inspectional Services last week, you heard from the Fire Chief, and you heard from the Police Chief that these problem properties are not just about sometimes illegal electrical or illegal plumbing or a few extra people in a house. This is about real public safety issues that's affecting the neighborhoods, is affecting your schools, and is affecting the safety of the streets for your residences and businesses. Giving one example, here's an exterior shot of a photograph of 24 Walcott Street. It's a property right now that the solicitor and the Safe Housing Group has in litigation in Chelsea District Court. This is a house that was cut up into over 10 separate illegal units. You can see the satellite dishes, the exterior left on to the side. Just a real disaster of a property located just a block or so from an elementary school. And here, utilizing the tools that are currently available and 40U, which will allow Inspectional Services to move better, to move faster, and more efficiently. But right now, this is being dealt with. The occupants were removed from the property. The property is right now in court, and either the bank will be fixing up this property or the court will appoint a receiver, and this is going to be a rehabilitated property in the near future. Inside the house, giving examples, you had one unit that was cut up and they literally put a bathroom in a hallway closet. In the second photo, you see illegal plumbing that was running through one room to another. It was about 3 feet high that you would trip over. The third photo was a bedroom that was converted from a small laundry room and barely fit the bed that you see inside there. And inside there was a woman who was 7 months pregnant sleeping in that room, living in dangerous, unsanitary, and squalor conditions. The city, together with code enforcement, police, fire safety, working in conjunction with Chelsea Revere Winthrop Elder Services and other social services available, went and dealt with the property, and people who were needing of help were at least given the opportunity to pursue that. The next photograph is a fire that many of you are aware of and heard about. It occurred just last month where we had the frozen fire hydrants that people couldn't get to. This is located at 179 Hickborn. And here, illegal apartments inside the property, overusing electrical, and the fire damage was extensive. Numerous fire trucks having to go and try and rescue people and make sure that neighboring properties didn't go up in flames. So not only was there illegal apartments inside the house, but in the rear, You had a makeshift structure in the back and connections to kind of a separate garage area that they used, and you had satellite dish connections and electrical running from the house to the back. And inspectional services, utilizing the new 40U and all the tools that will be available, will not allow this property to go back to what it was before. It'll be redone and reconfigured in a legal way consistent with your zoning, your codes, your ordinances, and putting public safety first. So these are examples of what you see sometimes in the neighborhoods, what you're notifying inspectional services of, and this is really the need for this ordinance and for the change in approach and modernizing and giving ISD the tools that it needs to continue to go forward and combat these problem properties. Going into some detail here about the 40U process, we talked about it a bit last week, but I wanted to go through the procedures that are available. The state law set a number of procedures that the city must follow, but the city, looking at it, wanted to go and create a process that they felt was really fair and covered all the bases. So in a number of areas, Revere is going further than what the state law even requires. So a couple of steps. First, the inspectional services will notify the violation. Later on in this process, police and fire will be brought into it as well. The ticket issued and left physically at the property. Under the state law, that's enough right then and there. What the state law has said is that property owners need to be responsible for the property, and just renting it to tenants and turning a blind eye is not good enough anymore. Understanding the practicalities of the situation, Revere decided, and we feel correctly, that in addition to affixing the notice to the property, a courtesy letter will be sent promptly from inspectional services with a copy of the violation notice, a photograph if it was electronically taken, and sent to the owners with their address listed as of record in case they do not reside at that property. If there's no response from them at all, they get 21 days to pay or to request a hearing before your municipal hearing officer, Mr. Mara. If there's no response at all and they ignore the city, then they will get an additional notice letter being sent certified mail and first-class mail, giving them an additional 30 days to resolve the violation. The state law only requires the first-class mail. The city felt it'd be a prudent way just to make sure nothing falls through the cracks to go through the certified mail process at this step. And we think it's an excellent approach. It's something that other communities are not doing, and we think it's why Revere provides even more protections than what state law requires and what other communities are doing. Within 14 days of receiving the additional notice, the owner will have the opportunity to request a late hearing before the municipal hearing officer. So if they go and they could swear to the municipal hearing officer under the pains and penalties of perjury that they did not get the original notice, and now they see what the repercussion would be, that the ticket would automatically escalate to $500, they have the right to go and say, I didn't get it, give the reasons, and then the municipal hearing officer could grant them a late hearing. If the hearing is requested, it will be promptly scheduled to an automated system where the clerks at inspectional services will be communicating directly with the municipal hearing officer. It will be scheduled through an automated system, and they will have the opportunity to reschedule the hearing if need be, and that's something that's not available right now for them in court. In fact, just given the backlog that everybody's talked about and is familiar with at court, they're really not getting a hearing at all now. In addition to getting a hearing, they are going to get a written decision one way or the other within 21 days of the hearing and a full explanation of the decision that was reached. So the city will have an opportunity to challenge the decision if they don't agree with it, as will the owner, but they're going to know why they got the decision, not just it was affirmed or it was dismissed. And lastly, the process does not end at the city. If somebody feels they were aggrieved through this entire process, they'd have still the opportunity for judicial review. But the experience has been with other communities that have adopted this, that the number of appeals that you would see at court would drastically reduce. So that's an overview of the process. We talked a lot about the benefit of bringing these hearings internal to the city. We talked about the credentials of your municipal hearing officer, which we believe are unmatched, and we believe you're adopting a process that incorporates both the spirit and purpose of the state statute, but has also looked at it practically, has looked at it functionally, and has improved upon the state statute to incorporate things that you had in your ordinances before that were working, and procedures that I think the city feels would be fair to everybody involved. This is a little chart that we created that talked about how the city is currently doing things under the old law and things that will benefit the city. I'm not going to go through it in great detail, just pull out a couple of examples of inspectional services. Their whole process right now is manual. It's just not being computerized at all. So no matter how well you do it, how organized you are, if you're writing things in pen and trying to track things, things are going to get lost. People aren't going to get the notices that they're entitled to. Bad properties that need to really be ticketed and get over to the tax bills is going to get lost as well. So we're going to have automation in inspectional services. The city clerk right now, under the current state law, Mass General Law Chapter 21D, is responsible for dealing with the property owners and taking payments at the city clerk's office. Problem is, they don't even have access to the code enforcement information. They don't know the tickets. They don't know why the people have the violations, and they're not able to provide the customer service that the city would want of them. But the law really made no sense that required that. So the city clerk's going to be taken out of the code enforcement process where they never belonged to begin with. The collector's office, we talked about the financial integration that will exist between inspectional services and the collector's office. Right now, they have a manual process with spreadsheets and reports, trying to track things, trying to give information to people when they're refinancing and selling properties and things of that nature, but highly burdensome, highly manual. This will be an integrated system. And police and fire, as we spoke about, over the next few months, once this gets up and running, they will be out there, because they're out there on the streets, they see these problems, and they will be out there able to deal with them. And as a functional matter, it's going to start at inspectional services, and your ordinance will give the opportunity and create the system for it to grow into police and fire as well. And the last is just a flow chart which shows all of the due process protections that the state built in. And this is kind of how the system will work, and it takes you through what happens when a ticket is issued versus all different avenues of appeal. But this has all been worked on for quite some time to make sure that the city of Revere has a special program, has a functional program, and will be able to address the problem properties in a fair and efficient way. I'd be happy to answer any questions or concerns that any councilors may have.
I think at this time I'll take questions from councilors. Councilor Hess.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Peter, I think this Mass General Law 40U is going to help out the city tremendously. I think it puts some teeth into our ordinances, zoning, and it also gives the authority to the various inspectors when they go out. But one thing when you mentioned, we were talking last week about a piece of property in Arthur's area up in Cummings Ave? Cushman Ave, okay? They have many families living in there. Can you just elaborate on that again, what you said?
I can't speak to that specific property. I remember Nick spoke about it, as did the fire chief.
How you doing?
In that particular property, what I recall of them saying is that they investigated it for a particular reason, that it being a rooming house. And I could reiterate what they said, which is that it's a complicated definition, both under the fire code and the state sanitary code and the city ordinances. And people can differ as to what is and is not a rooming house. What I can say is that based on my experience and my consulting with a number of municipalities, that when you typically have a large number of people living together, and this doesn't apply to all properties, but I think it applies to a lot, you will see some of the examples that you saw in the 24 Walcott photo that we saw. People doing cross-metering, illegal electrical systems, illegal plumbing systems. And once that happens, then it's a violation of your ordinances, it's a violation of the state sanitary code, and it opens the door to all the corrections that are allowed in this process. But if all you have is a code-compliant process, a code-compliant home that has the appropriate egresses, and they haven't put in illegal kitchens and illegal plumbing, and it's just the number of people living there. If the law allows for it, and typically it's based on whether the people are related, of blood relation, they are allowed to put a lot of people in one particular residence.
As long as they meet the fire codes, police codes, et cetera,
Correct.
right? So in situations like that we mentioned, if we have the fire department go up there and check it, all right, if we go out to the building department, I'm not sure what the police would do up there, but again, this will give the teeth for you that we can actually do something.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you, excellent job, very good, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Haas. Councilor Reardon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Chairmen. Just to go over, and I talked to Attorney Brown after the last meeting, and he gave me some assurances of my concerns, but just to reiterate those concerns, this is what we need in this city. I'm not going to mince words. We have so many institutional owners of property in this city that have neglected the property as a result of foreclosures, abandonment, et cetera, that we're no longer in a position to tolerate the process as it stands right now, and it's moribund, it's inefficient. We need to do what we can to hold people accountable, particularly institutional owners of property. My concern was and is, although somewhat allayed by Attorney Brown's explanation to me last year, which I'm going to ask you in a second to discuss. My concern is the last of your flow chart, the last boxes on your flow charts. Lien on property pursuant to MGL Chapter 40 and 42B on two separate of these processes, three separate processes. That could end up being the result. And my concern, again, is not for the institutional property owner. They should know better. They are 24/7 vigilant because they have offices and they have staffs and they have attorneys of their own. I'm concerned about the little guy, the man who owns the two-family property, perhaps goes to Florida or is not a resident and leaves it up to a maintenance person or a tenant perhaps to deal with these issues. And 90 days after he's returned from Florida, on May 1st, he finds out he's got a $500 lien on his property. That's a big concern, particularly if the initial problem was a $25 fine. So I think everybody can see that. And let me say one more thing before I give you an opportunity to explain what you explained to me last week. Nobody in this city government has any intent to hurt that person I'm talking about in any way, shape, or form. I want to assure the public that the mayor has no interest in it, the city councilors, the inspectional services do not want to hurt the little guy. They want to hurt the egregious violators of our codes. So that's perfectly clear. My only concern is that the road to perdition is paved with good intentions, as refers to that little guy. So if you could possibly explain the process beyond this lien a little bit so people would understand the protections that are involved.
Yes. So, Councilor, as we discussed last week, is that once it goes through the entire process, and again, we feel that even in the scenario that was presented, if someone does have someone monitoring the property or has their mail being forwarded, nothing would happen to them for a minimum of close to 60 days. So if they're away, again, they'll get that courtesy letter, that mail will be forwarded to them, and they will get that. If they didn't get the chance to request a hearing in a timely manner, there's the procedure to go and request a late hearing. I think it's going to be unlikely, but you're right, it can happen, that you would have a responsive property owner that would even get to the end process, because the only way it gets liened on the 40U is the same system that the city has right now under its special law that took effect in 1991, which is the notices go out, nobody responds, and then it automatically gets escalated. Right now, you're escalating to $300. Under the 40U, you're going to escalate to $500, which a much better notice process and automated process. But specifically, Councilor Reardon, to your question, in the event that all the way gets to the end, you're still not past the point of not coming back in the event of really some special or extraordinary circumstances. What will happen is that automatically, once it reaches the end, it becomes a lien on the system. So if somebody were to file for bankruptcy, or somebody were to do a refinance or a sale, it would be a legal lien at that point. It would no longer be a ticket, and it would have to be paid. But in terms of going on the tax bill, the way municipal software works, it will only actually go on the tax bill at 1 point per year, which will be roughly between November and December, the same time that the city collector puts unpaid water sewer bills onto the tax bills. So that will happen at that point. If it's in that process where it's become a legal lien and has not yet been put onto the tax bill, the director of finance, your treasurer, would have legal authority if he felt there was some exceptional circumstance to be able to put it back into the municipal hearing level where somebody could have a late hearing. I would say that that should be a really unusual occurrence and an unusual request, given all the protections that are built in here, but you wouldn't be past the point where that couldn't be done if truly exceptional circumstances were present. And then the last part of this is that even if it got past that point and got on the tax bill, there's also another extraordinary remedy, which if somebody says they made a mistake and the tickets never should have been issued or whatever it is, the city could always petition the Department of Revenue, and the commissioner of the Department of Revenue could decide to take it off the tax bill. So there are those due process protections. I do believe they would be far and few between, but in the event of something really special or extraordinary, those powers would exist.
Thank you, Peter. I think it's reassuring for the public to know that this is, that is available, those avenues of redress are available, and of course, that there is discretion involved. And, you know, the people we're putting in place, George, in the commissioner, are going to, are people of great discretion. So I thank you for explaining that. I hope that everybody who's listening feels a little bit more at ease.
Thank you, Councilor Reardon. Councilor Novoselsky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Peter, I'm glad you brought up Walcott Road. I was after that property for 4 years prior to everything hitting the fan. And there were people using that property to sell cars. They were buying them at the auction, lining them up in the driveway. People were coming in at night and picking the cars up. And the guy was selling the cars right there. He was using it as a used car lot. And he wasn't even legal in the house. He was living in the basement at the time. And, you know, I'm glad this is coming up because I think this will be, give us the meat and the teeth, as everybody was calling it, to go after these people and be able to follow through with it. Before it was just, it was exacerbation on our point that we couldn't get anything done. You know, we'd send the lady the tickets and she'd pay them and we'd forget about it. And a lot of people would pay the tickets and not fix what was wrong. But that was kind of our fault for not following up to see if they did fix it, other than, you know, just paying it. So I'm glad Walcott Road came up. Will 40U allow our building department to actually go after a building that they, without going on the property, of course, because I know they can't just haphazardly go on, legally go on. Actually go after a building that you can see unsafe porches, because, you know, I've had that in the past and I was always told we couldn't. So
Yes.
This does give us that authority to do, and make the people fix them.
Yes.
Evacuate the building if we have to for unsafe conditions. And
Sure. Depending upon the severity, but the answer is yes. That a structure that the building department could determine is unsafe from a pure visual inspection would allow it to go under this 40U process. And the hope is that property owners will understand that this is going to have real force and effect. And one of the things that we talked about last week, and it's been a major focus for the mayor, is that this is a new way that the city's going to go about doing its business, that it's more than just doing the 40U tickets, it's more about just doing the hearings, but it's incorporating an internal communication structure from the residents to the counselors to the Safe Housing Task Force, to the solicitor, to something that works. And I think, and some of the things that you've heard about last week and you've been seeing over the past few months, that this is another tool in the toolbox, but things are really starting to move.
Good. And I know you brought up Hitchborn Street also. My neighborhood is one of the oldest neighborhoods in the city, along with Beachmont. There's a few other spot sections, but we have the oldest immigrant communities in all of Revere. And this just shows of what's going on and what has been going on over the last, and I'll say last 30 years. People just, and it's not whether they're Jewish people or Asian people or Muslim people, it's everybody, and some of them don't know the laws, and we understand that, but they have to be taught, and this is the way we want to do it. But I think this is a great process that we're going to get. People will understand that we mean business. And I think it's important that that happens. And I have a lot of confidence in Mr. Mara, who will be his hearing officer. He did a great job in the License Commission and his own attorney and being our city solicitor for a little while. I have a lot of faith in him, and I think a lot of good things will come with this thing. And I look forward to voting for it tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Novoselsky. Council President Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice President. I have a couple of concerns, and while I have those concerns, I fully support the process. I think it's long overdue. I'm a former employee of the Revere Health Department years ago, and I know of the conditions that exist out there, and some of those conditions, through no fault of the health departments, continue to exist because homeowners are absentee and they really just sort of fluff it off. One of my concerns is that the owners of the property be notified of the new ordinance, that we make a really concerted effort to do that so no one can turn around when they call one of us and say, hey, we got a ticket and we didn't know about that. So I think we have to have a real concerted effort to do that. The other thing I believe that if you're sending a notice to a person, a violation, that should include a photo of the violation so they know exactly what they're being fined for and the reason for it. I had a situation, and I don't know if this will address that or not, I hope it will, down on Shawmut Street. I had 3 people knock on someone's door down there at probably 10 o'clock in the evening looking for the people that own the hotel next to them. The hotel happened to be a single-family house. I later went online and found out that they actually had pictures of rooms with a bed, and these people that were looking for the hotel were from France. They had made reservations online, and they come there at 10 o'clock at night, and there was no hotel, obviously. But I mean, this is going on in the city, and I think we really have to make a strong effort to address that. I have a lot of positive feelings knowing that Bob Mara is going to be the hearings officer on this, because I think he's very fair and very impartial, and I know he'll do a good job not only for the city but for the residents themselves that for some reason may have put their trash out an hour too early or something like that. Those are the people I don't think we should be out there hurting. I think the people that we should be going after as a city government are the people that own property, that could care less, that don't live in the city, that are abusing every building code in the city. So I'm going to support this 100%, and I hope that all of those concerns will be kept in mind and adhered to with regard to implementing the 40U program. Thank you, Mr. President, Mr. Vice President.
Thank you, President Powers. I'm going to call on the Chairman of Public Safety, who's co-chairing this meeting, Councilor Patch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One thing I want to bring out here is that over the years, 7 years as being a counselor, I've learned a great deal about this, these rooming houses, and working along with the building inspector and the health inspector and the fire department, and I've learned that the inspectors really, the building and health inspectors have their hands tied a little bit, obtaining entrance to these houses. So we have the chief of police here tonight, and I know myself, they have no problem getting into houses. When they get calls to go on various calls, they get into houses. I just think if we put together some kind of policy where a police officer just happens to go into a house, if they come up with some kind of policy, looks around, he sees some bedrooms with locks on it, doesn't see the proper, and teach these guys how to see if they have the proper meters, electric meters and stuff, that if they could communicate, I would think probably to the fire department and in the inspection departments too, but the fire department could follow up, and they have a right to go in for the fire codes. So, and they can relay it to the inspection and then get the ball rolling. That's the biggest, I think the biggest problem is getting access into these houses. So I don't know if the chief thinks that's a good idea, but I mean, I know myself, way before this was probably even a problem, I can't even remember going on calls as a police officer years ago and seeing locks on bedroom doors, but I thought not to know it, you know what I mean? So I just would like maybe later on run that by once this thing gets off the ground to set up some kind, unless you have a...
Well, Councilor, you hit the nail on the head, which is one of the reasons giving the property that Councilor Novoselsky talked about for people complaining about from a long time from the exterior, not having access and all the evidence to be able to deal with things. So one of the things the city's done through David Krasnoff and the Safe Housing Group is to set up a communication infrastructure that really works so that it doesn't get lost when your residents tell you information and it gets relayed to a various department, that it is now being brought together, it is being organized, other evidence and corroborating evidence is being put together, and a process is underway. And what the city is doing is two things to address the long-standing problems that Councilor Patriou and Councilor Novoselsky were referring to. Number one, the city now has a process of obtaining administrative search warrants for Chelsea District Court. And what the city did is they went and met with the head clerk and reviewed the process with the presiding justice over at the court and said, these are the steps we're going to follow internally to try and investigate problem properties the best we can from the outside, to try and get cooperation from the owner. But if at a certain point we don't get in, we're going to come before you and ask for court permission to come in and get the information and get the evidence that we need. And the court signed off on that process, and the city over the past few months has done about a dozen or so administrative search warrants and has gone after properties and has been ticketing them and has obtained receiverships and is getting properties rehabilitated. And we're seeing that really work. The second thing that the city's done is develop an effective communication referral system from both the police department and the fire department, so that when information comes in, doesn't matter from where, everybody is brought into the process. Everybody's giving their 2 cents about what they know and what they're concerned about. So if a fire inspector goes in for a fire reason, they're doing a referral, they're taking a photograph and referring it back, and you're really seeing things move. And so this 40U process is part of all of those steps that are being taken. Going after people in court, issuing tickets, getting access to administrative search warrants, working with the various departments to really go and deal with things that historically have not been that successful. So those are the things that are being done. And additionally, what we're going to do with the police department and the fire department is do trainings for them on things to identify within the state sanitary code that apply to 40U. So most of the police officers and fighters now, when they see something, they know how to refer it, but it's going to be specific, and they'll know exactly what to look for. And over the next few months, they'll be getting devices or the ability to issue manual tickets going forward as well. So the history of all of these departments kind of being fragmented and not getting the information and the evidence, that's all going away, and this is going to be just a tremendously effective tool for the entire city, and for you as councilors to be able to see the things that you need done actually go and get done with the results.
Right. And just one other thing is that with these new devices, this is going to be a great help to the inspection services, and because as my colleagues know, we get calls all the time about violations that in the past, and with these new devices, taking a picture, you always have two sides to a story, and the picture tells us what really happened. So I think it's just the whole 40U is just it's about time. I mean, and to get it just to get it going, and again, we're not out to hurt the residents of the city. We want them to know. We just want them to take care of their property. The worst thing that ever happens to, like I said before in the last meeting, the worst thing that ever happens to a neighborhood is to have a vacant house or, unfortunately, a person that is foreclosed on and just can live there for years and just let don't take care of their property. Those are the people that we really want to go to get and correct it, because the quality of life, that's the key. It ruins the whole neighborhood. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Council Guanasso.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, the best form of enforcement is the neighborhoods. Our neighbors tell us the concerns, and whether they relay the message to us as elected capacity, or whether they call the departments. But certainly there's an outcry, and I'm very concerned about it, as you probably know from the previous meeting we held. I feel pain for neighbors that live by the law. They try to do the best thing for their home and their property and their family, and they try to be neighborly, good neighbors to each and every neighbor around there. We see this proliferation of people coming in, and it's almost like we're relating to a third world concept, that their fashion of life back in those countries is being brought over to us. Now, that's not to be accepted. That's not, no matter what the conditions are, no one should throw trash out a window. No one should overexceed the limit of humanity, of allowing people to live like this. And these type of things have to be stopped. I mean, we have to do whatever we have to do to enforce our laws. And I'm all for it, because I experience so many calls from people that are so concerned. And the first order of business is we should take some sort of audit of mailboxes. When you go up to a property, and I see it when I go door to door, and I see 7 mailboxes, a two-family house, and 7 mailboxes in two-family, or 4 or 5 mailboxes in a single family, something doesn't register right here. And according to what we said, it has to be the same name if you allow these people to sleep on a bed, on a mattress, even though those aren't the standards of life that we would like to have in our culture that's existing today. You don't have to go too far. You go to the public schools and see unsightly, you see kids coming to school knowing that they're not properly cared for, or they don't have the proper clothing for the elements. those things ring a bell. They sound off some sort of alarm that say, what if that's what the poor kid is coming to school looking? What's the property like that he's living in? And so there's so many, we can't correct the whole world, obviously, but what we should do is give some relief to people who live and reside in our community and live to a standard of life that we all like to adhere to. And yes, I think inspectional services is burdened with, people putting their trash out early, certain bags being put outside. Put all those aside and let's address some of these other issues. It's like the police department. They have major crimes to deal with, more important than somebody that's doing a petty little thing or disturbing. All important to everybody, but you got to set your criteria as to what's more important and how do we fashion to go after this project. So I'm all for 40U. I think it's the thing to do. I think that the enforcement, I think we got the right, very able officer to preside over it, and he's got a good head and his shoulders, and he certainly shows a lot of compassion. And I've known him for years, and I know him to be nothing but a fine gentleman. So I think the city is doing the right thing, and I think Peter and you and your staff has done an admirable job, and obviously David is with his input to come up with something that's very, very doable for our community. This was like you refined the conditions of 40U to live with Revere, and I think that that's a good thing that you and your group did in your efforts to combine all this. And George Anzoni coming in to also give his assistance, and certainly Nick Catanazzo, who does a great job as our inspectional director. There's a big challenge out there, and it's not to suggest that it's going to be corrected overnight, but at least give some bit of hope to our residents that something's going to be done about this. We're listening to you. We hear your concerns, and we're going to go forward with what we have to do. So I give you all my applause and your efforts, and I'm certainly voting for this evening. Thanks, Peter. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor Guanasso. I'm obviously completely in favor of this ordinance, and I don't have any questions. That's rare, I know. However, if anybody from the team wants to add anything to this before we take this up for a vote in committee and then hopefully at the council meeting just vote it in. Anybody from the team? David, anybody? We have, I probably neglected to mention that we have the chief of police here. We have the financial guru, George Anzoni. We have the building inspector, Benny DeCristoforo. We have David, who is the leader in this, David Krasnoff, who's the leader in this whole thing and has put countless hours in it, and he's probably dreams about this ordinance at this point. We have city solicitor here, and of course, we have the new hearings officer, Bob Mara, who we've said many times that we're thrilled to have him take this responsibility. We know it is, and I'm sorry I forgot this young lady's name, but she's been an integral part of this. We thank you for all your hard work. So that being said, I think if we get a couple of my members back here, we'll take this up for a vote. Or do we have the subcommittee members here? We have enough? Okay. So do you want to call the roll? Well, okay, we'll just do it. We'll just do an all in favor to vote this out favorably, and when it comes to the council meeting, we'll all vote for it. All in favor, all opposed, to vote this out favorably? Aye. So voted. That concludes this joint committee of the Legislative Affairs and Public Safety Committee. Thank you all for your cooperation.